Good evening, everybody. This is Darrell Anderson. I am with the South Atlantic Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Churches. And I should say the Great South Atlantic Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Churches. We enjoy ministry in this field, and we've got some exciting things going on. Some of you have returned and rejoined us in part 2 of our series, As for Me and My House Family Leadership webinar. This is where the men's ministry of South Atlantic come together with a virtual conversation that will help us with tools to better ourselves and our families. Right now, we're dealing with the subject of regaging the spiritual atmospheres in our home during this time of sheltering in place. These unfortunate circumstances have given us an opportunity to press reset and to look around us as we are sheltering in with our families, and then to just ask ourselves the questions, what can I do to make my household stronger and better and more spiritual? Are there any things I can bring into play? Can I reset my worship? Can I reset my Bible study? Can we just sit around the dinner table and have conversations, get to learn each other and grow in each other again? And so we have an esteemed panel of ministers that have joined us today. I'm going to introduce the panel in a little while, but to start us out, I'm going to say a short prayer over this conversation and introduce you to our leader. He is the Family Ministries and Men's Ministry Director of South Atlantic Conference, Elder Melvin Preston. So if you will, bow your heads with me and let's cover this conversation in prayer. Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, we remove ourselves and we ask that you fill us with your spirit today. Speak through our lips so that someone will be blessed. We want to edify our brothers in Christ as we glorify your name. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. So at this time, with no further ado, we introduce to you Elder Melvin Preston, the Men's Ministry Director of South Atlantic Conference.
Thank you very much, Pastor Anderson. And we'd like to just welcome our audience back for part 2 today. I don't know about you, but I was really excited about last week, and I'm even more excited today what is going to take place. As we use as our theme for me and my house, as we talked about Joshua chapter 24 and verses 15, and then we moved down to verses 22, 23, and 24 about God asking us that we should get rid of these strange gods that is set before us. And I know that in life itself, many individuals have strange gods, those things that they need to move out of the way so that God can move in. I'm excited about our panel today, and I'm hoping that you will enjoy it, but not only enjoy it, but we hope that you will benefit from it, because what we're looking for today are strong men who can make strong leaders in our homes today. Someone always criticized the church not being strong, but beloved, unless you have a strong home, you will never have a strong church. It starts at the home. And that's where we are today with men's ministry. And that's why we're bringing these webinars to you live, not only last week, but today and also on next week. So once again, Pastor Anderson, I thank you for leading us on our panel today. And may God bless us as he direct us and guide us on this beautiful Sabbath.
Elder Preston, we certainly appreciate you reminding us of the importance of removing those strange gods. Anything that is in the household that will interfere with us having a pure, unadulterated relationship with God, and then being the priest, provider, and protector that God assigned us to be over our family. As I shared with the audience last week, the word husband derives from 2 words, house and band. That's right, a husband is a house band God has assigned us to wrap ourselves around our family, to be expandable, and to be able to grow in grace as we lead our families to his throne. And I believe the dialogue today is going to help give men tools to do just that. One of the things I want to start this conversation out with today, Elder Preston, is some very important feedback we received from last week. A gentleman presented something to you that stuck with you. You shared with me, now I'm sharing with our audience today, and that is this. What do we say to the men who were raised by a single mother, who did not have that father influence in the house? Therefore, they've had to somewhat teach themselves how to be a man. Mom did what she could do, but that element of a man teaching a boy how to be a man was missing. Let's start this conversation out there, because it is an extremely important piece that applies to a lot of men. What say you, Elder Preston?
I was very fortunate to have a parent, a father figure in my home. And as I mentioned on last week, I was very happy that my father, with 9 children, always admired him, because I saw in our neighborhood where some homes did not have a father. Some of my best friends' parents came from a single parent home, even back then. But what I really appreciate, my father, who took them in, these boys in, and mentor them. And that's what even Sister White have asked us to even to do today. And I'm hoping that during these seminars that we can learn, even though you may not have a father figure in the home, you can still be the man that God intended for you to be.
That's
But we
right.
have to trust him and not just go with this status quo. I believe that we have some brilliant men in this world who was raised by a single parent.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to these mothers who took on almost like a dual role. And by the way, since we are talking about this single parent, on the behalf of men's ministry in the South Atlantic Conference, we just like to wish I know we got some ladies out there, because last week when we got through, the first person who texted me was a lady. And so I know we have them out there. So I'd just like to wish you happy Mother's Day. Yes. And I'm hoping that those who were in those single parent home just hang with us today and next week. And we're going to bring you some useful tools that can help you to continue to be the man that you want to be, but most of all, that you will glorify our Father which is in heaven.
All right, thank you, sir. So remember what Joshua said, choose you today who you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now that the arrows have pointed in a particular direction, let's begin to talk. Now I'm excited because I have the opportunity to introduce our esteemed panel today. We have coming to us from Live Right, Be Well. That is a nonprofit who was founded by its CEO, Quest Green. He is also the director of TGI Married Ministries, and that is, thank God I'm married, Quest Green. Then we have 3 esteemed pastors from the South Atlantic Conference. We have Pastor Andrew Nixon, Pastor Evan Willis, and Pastor Daniel Kelly. These brothers pastor in the great state of North Carolina, and they bring some serious brain power to this conversation. I'm going to start out with Quest Green. The arrows have been pointed in a particular direction, and we see that there are some men out there who had to find their way to manhood without a father. With you being the founder of Live Right, Be Well, and the director of TGI Married, what are some of the things you say to men who may have crossed that bridge? And then if you can relate to that in any way, Quest Green, talk to us right now.
Well, Elder, it's funny you should say that, because I'm one of those men that crossed that bridge, right? My parents got divorced when I was in the 2nd grade. My father lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and we lived in New York, right? Shout out to Northeastern Conference. Really and truly, I was left to find out all about manhood through friends, the conversations, that men go through. We talk about sex, what it is to, and unfortunately, I didn't always get the best of advice, but thanks be to God, what my grandmother did was she influenced my mom, right? And I ended up being a part of the church early in the game. I went to private school from kindergarten up until 8th grade, right? I went to Hanson Place in Brooklyn. And then I went to Excelsior Elementary, which is also an Adventist learning institution. And then for my freshman and midway through my sophomore year, I went to Greater New York Academy, right? Also Adventist high school. And then we moved to Jersey. But the thing I think that was most influential for me is that although I grew up as the only male in the house with 5 women, there were men around the church who had actual relationships with God, who took a moment to see, oh, that kid got a spark in him. Let me go ahead and nurture that spark. And I believe that's a major part of the developmental process in terms of becoming a man, if you will, because where do you turn to? Okay, let me just say this. I believe only a man can teach a man how to be a man. And while women, and not to take anything away from single mothers, they did the best that they could with what they had. But only a man can teach a man how to be a man. And praise be to God, there were some men in the church who had relationship. Yes, I believe in some brothers who in church out of routine. I had some men of God who had relationship, who made sure that I was a part of Pathfinders, and not only made sure I was a part, but would show up and come kick it with everybody, which made them relatable. They formed relationship with me. And that was the thing I believe that allowed me to grow, if you will. There was still a lot more learning as I progressed through manhood, but I think that's one of the things that are definitely needed.
There are 2 things that I hear now, and I'm going back to something Elder Preston said and something you said. You said the word relationship, and then Elder Preston said something about the view of the church to some is that the church is not strong. Can't remember the exact words, are viable. But one of the problems we have is sometimes we put religion over relationship, and when you put religion over relationship, you have a false sense of security because you have a false structure. And we need to go back to that relationship piece and being responsible. Cain asked God, am I my brother's keeper? Well, the answer to that is yes, we are. We are each other's keeper. And I'm going to talk to us about being each other's keeper through some examples from the book of Exodus. But right now, I want to go to the Elder Daniel Kelly, because you've heard something going on. We hear that some people perceive us as being weak. We understand that we must have relationship, and that if you don't, and if we are not men doing our job to be nurturers and mentors and examples, we can lose a whole generation. Has anything fed your spirit as of yet in this conversation, Elder Kelly?
Absolutely. I consider my upbringing, I'd use the word privileged to have a 2-parent household. My mom and my father raised my sister and I. And I did experience, the blessings of having father in the home. Nevertheless, what I did also experience in my older years was the importance of mentorship. And I think that is what we're lacking. A religious body, as a group of people, is the idea of mentorship. Elisha had Elijah.
Yes.
And Elisha turned around and mentored, I forget the young man's name, but he turned around and had somebody to mentor as well. And so that goes into the arena of just knowing enough about ourselves to know what our weaknesses are, to know that, hey, I need to help this situation without expecting anything in return, financially, without expecting even anything relationally from, sometimes we've caused so much damage because we want to help, but then we make a mess. As I got older, high school, college, I needed mentorship because there was an age gap. My dad was almost 40 years old when I was born. And so by the time I was 10, he was 50. And there was a culture gap. My father's from Jamaica. And so there was so much that he couldn't understand. And there's so much that there was a gap, as it were, as far as what I needed. So that's where mentorship came in for me. And I thank God for the men of God, including Calvin Preston, Melvin Preston, who took me under their wing and treated me as a son, as it were, to help in understanding certain things that I'm matriculating.
So the building blocks of strength now, again, going back to how Elder Preston started this conversation as it pertains to the perception by some, and then how Quest Green landed us in the relationship piece. And now you have added the building blocks of mentorship, which is a very, very strong element in relationship. And we know that already we're beginning to see some takeaways that are just imperative to men becoming who we should be to ourselves, to our families, and to our communities at large. Elder John Nixon, you're a young pastor, and I do believe you're one of among us, and it's an honorable thing to be able to know that you have such a strong foundation beneath you coming up, because I know some of the men in your family, you just come from a strong tribe of men. How can you add to this conversation?
Well,
and I called you Andrew. I didn't call you your cousin's name.
you called me John, but it's
I
all right.
did, yeah,
It's
now,
all right.
Andrew Nixon.
It's okay.
I
It's
tell
okay.
you, that's just that strong family thing. I just caught myself. That's Elder.
It's all right. It's all right.
Go ahead, man.
I mean, hey,
go ahead, man.
I love the man, so it's okay. But yeah, I was thinking about this as you guys were talking, and I can say for me, you know, like others have said, I was blessed, privileged to be able to grow up in a home where I had, you know, both my mother and father. And recently, I was going through a training with some of the elders at my church, and we were talking about discipleship. And I'm going to bring this back around to what we're talking about. And I had read this book that was talking about how discipleship occurs. And it talked about that the fact that a lot of what Christ taught the disciples was not so much like in a textbook or in a classroom setting, but it was just by example. And as I was reading that book, it really, you know, stood out to me that I was thinking about that in the relationship with myself and my father. A lot of the things that my father taught me were things that he taught me by example. It wasn't a whole lot of, well, Andrew, look, I'm going to go out right now and teach you this thing because one day you're going to need this specific thing. It wasn't so much that it was that explicit, but it was more implicit that he just did it. And because I looked up to him and because he set an example as a good father, that was something that I was following. So bringing this back over to the conversation of what you would do if you're in the situation where, you know, you don't have that father influence. I was kind of thinking that I kind of feel like, I almost feel like, I won't say I've experienced both, but in a way, I kind of feel like I can relate in some ways to both. You know, I loved my father, looked up to my father. He was like my role model. He was like Superman to me. But then, you know, when I was just 23, I believe I was, my father passed away from cancer. It's been almost 10 years now. And, you know, I was still being only 23, just only out of the home a couple of years. I was out and I had started pastoral ministry and I was out on my own and I had been kind of setting the tone of my own home. And a lot of the things, like I said, I did in my home were things that I just saw my father did. And I didn't really think about it. It was just stuff that I did because it was what was instilled in me. But then after he passed, there were a lot of times, and there still are to this day, times where something comes up and I think to myself, I really wish I could ask my dad his advice on this or what he would say to do on this. So I've been going through that for like the last 10 years and there's been that void for me. And I'll tell you this, how I have, you know, tried to replace it is that I have done my best to try to find godly men you know, who are obviously older than me, who I respect, who I know to be people who, like my brother Quest mentioned, who are people who have a relationship with God, who aren't just, you know, checking in every week at church, but who have a relationship with God, who I've seen in their lives, the character of Christ seen in them. And I've tried to seek out those men and talk to them. And it's crazy. It feels weird to say this, but it's the truth. You know, as men, that's another thing, that we need to be vulnerable. We need to be willing to speak about, you know, our feelings and stuff. I'll be honest, you know, after my father died, there still are to this day, a lot of times where I just feel like I miss him. And I just feel like, man, I just wish I had my father. Or when I know I can't have my father back, I just feel like I wish I had that father figure in my life, you know? And so I have actively tried to seek out those individuals, a few individuals in my life. And I try to, you know, even if it's just, honestly, sometimes it's just emotional.
Yes.
It is just being able to find emotional fulfillment that I would have probably been getting from my father. I do try to get that from men who I find that I look up to, who can be mentors to me. So if I were to talk to a man who was saying that, you know, he didn't get that in, you know, because his father was absent or not alive or whatever it may be, I would say that would be the first place to start, to try to seek out some men that you know to be godly men, you've seen the character of, and try to develop a relationship with them and see, because there are so many things, I think, that we as men, and that's another conversation, we are afraid to try to deal with and be vulnerable with our feelings and things. And we do need those things, though, because I believe God created us to have that need, that desire for those things. And so
you have said that, you know, you've said a mouthful. Elder Evan Willis, I'm coming to you in a second. I'm gonna drop a big bomb in your lap that will kind of guide us over into the next part of this conversation. But Elder Andrew Nixon, I want to say something. Let me go ahead and go to Elder Kelly. Then I'm going to say something to you that's going to lead us to Elder Willis. Elder Kelly, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I just want to interject there. I hope I'm not out of order, but I think something that Pastor Nixon said that triggered in my mind just the importance of godly men, not waiting to be sought, but seeking mentorship. Thank God for those who are mature enough to say, hey, I need mentorship. I need that, you know, guidance. You know, but a lot of us don't have that. You know, we have a pride issue. So we're too prideful to seek out and say, hey, I need help. Godly man, you'd see a woman, for example, that has 3 sons, you know, and you know, there's so many wolves in sheep's clothing. There's so many men who would prey on a woman like that. We've seen time after time where a guy would see that as a situation where, hey, I'm going to come into your child, and they end up, you know, trying to take advantage of the mother, or even, God forbid, the child. You know, and so this is the importance of godly men. See the need and then address the need. I just wanted to
very much. And we're going in, like I said, we're going into some deep water, and I'm glad you interjected that, because it's actually kind of guided to where I'm going. If I could take a piece from last week's conversation, we talked about that humility piece. We went to 2 Chronicles 7:14, and one of the principal formulas in the counsel from that scripture is humility. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves. So that humility is a very, very strong piece. One of the things I gleaned from what Elder Andrew Nixon was talking about is, one, he said 10 years ago, his father passed. That puts you at 33. So you're the age Christ was when he went to the cross. That's a powerful piece to see that that you're still wearing your youth well, while you are at the same time a mature minister of the gospel. As Christ was when he hung on the cross. So Elder Willis, this is where we're going right now. I know you've gathered from everything you've heard. How do we have, and then if there's anything you want to interject that's added to this question, feel free, because I don't want you to lose a thought that you may have, but added to that thought, how do we handle the balance of sometimes being a young man who has to mentor an older man? There's a thing called arrested development, where a person can be traumatized at a certain age in life, 10, 12, younger, 8, 7, and they get stuck there. And so we grow physically, but we don't grow mentally and spiritually. And now we're grown men, as Elder Preston started us out, some of us not having that man to be a godly man who is mentoring, leading, and being an example to us. Now we're at a place and an age in our life where we don't have the tools, but there's a younger man who comes along who has the tools, but the pride kicks in. And we don't want to take advice from sometimes the better suited person who may not be as old as we are. These are some of the dynamics that we have to deal with. Can you take something from that, Elder Willis, and help us? And then if there's anything you had to add, feel free. We give you the time right now. Yes, Elder Willis, take your mute off. You're on mute.
There we go. I thought someone else would turn my mute. Okay. So I would say a couple of things. So currently I'm working on studying and examining Black males, particularly in education. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to keep in mind that in order for a Black male student to trust a teacher, because the classroom is in a place of a lot of trauma for many Black students, yes, specifically Black males. Mm-hmm. First, the student has to learn to trust the one who's trying to teach him. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not about how much you know. It's not about the degree behind your name. It's about, can I trust you? And I notice I have that tendency where when I'm in school, I'll oftentimes wait after class to talk to the professor to get to know the professor before I start to listen to what the professor's really saying to me. And so for me, I think one, if a younger man is going to, in a sense, mentor an older individual who's been affected, that he is stuck in that same age range or in that space, first, that younger man has to demonstrate why he is a benefit to that individual for them to see it for themselves. So it's impossible for you to go and say, hey, man, I'm about to mentor you. I'm 25 years old and you're 35. It more so has to be, you have to demonstrate that trust. You have to build that relationship with them so that it's not really coming off as mentorship as much as it's coming off as a brotherhood, a friendship, a relationship. Yes. And once you're able to develop that, then I think people will do that. And I know for myself personally, I don't know why, but older men have come to me seeking my guidance, my counsel. And I guess maybe they see the hand of God in my life. Maybe they see something in me that they wonder how I'm able to manage so many things. But I think it's first building a relationship, building a rationale why you're a credible person to follow, and moving on from there. In addition, I believe that most people get stuck in an age range because of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, some kind of trauma has kept them from unlocking and going to that next stage in life. They say age ain't nothing but a number, because I know plenty of older people who act younger than my children. Exaggerating, but you know. And so it's important that we, when we have those traumatic experiences, speaking for an older man who's trying to find their way out of this, that we, one, don't blame ourselves, acknowledge that there's pain and trauma, and seek the help necessary, whether it be counseling, whether it be talking with your pastor, whether it be, but don't go to the dangerous vices that lead down the pathway to destruction.
Very much so. So go ahead, Elder. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, to speak to the question, some thoughts I had were that, one of the main thoughts I have is that there's been a lot of talk, particularly in the African-American community, about the absence of fathers, and how almost in a deterministic manner, how it sets you up to fail. And while I acknowledge that there's importance to having a father, you know, I don't know where I would be today had not been having a strong father in my household and strong familial father figures in my life. But with having, even for those who don't have a father, I want you to know, as Elder Preston pointed out, as Quest pointed out, God didn't abandon you, and you don't have a deficit because you didn't have a father, because for those of us who grew up in church, we had those people in the church who poured up into us. Some of us, maybe our educator, poured into us. So there are people around us. There are people who poured into you and gave you the male influences that you may have lacked growing up. And so first I'd say, just because you didn't have a father doesn't mean that you're necessarily behind, because God knows how to compensate and give us exactly what we need, whether it be through father figures in the church and things of that nature. And even for those of us who do have a father, I read this book called Sticky Faith that talked about the importance of building a community. You know, in the Western mind, we focus on the nuclear home, not the nuclear home, the traditional home. But the reality is, in the biblical times, people came from a community of homes. And so it's important to have a community of homes, community of brothers in your church, community of fathers in the church who are able to be of a like mind and take their young men and youth and pour into them. Because if we aren't doing it, even for those of us who have fathers in the home, because not every father is a good father as well, even for those who have fathers in the home, it helps to build them up into the image of God, helps them build them up into the image of what a man is in our society. So I think it's important to embrace the community church fatherhood approach.
It is important, but I want to add a piece, and this is a very hard piece. It's a very real tough piece, because we can speak through the language of the subculture of the church and miss a whole part of society. We can miss the world at large. And Elder Preston, pay close attention to what I'm saying, because I'm coming right at you to help us out in this relationship piece, because we started out with those men who did not have fathers in their home. This is the big piece. And I'm going to be transparent right here to help me make my point. My father was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor who pursued ministry after he left a questionable lifestyle in the streets. I grew up right on the other side, in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty in Jersey City, New Jersey, right on the other side of the Hudson. And those were some tough streets growing up in that part of North Jersey. And I watched my father as a young man in his 20s make that transition, make that change, and move in the direction of bettering himself, which meant that there were some things we had to go through as a family for him to get there, to become that house man, that father that he needed to be. That led me to have a broken home. I think I shared last week, I was 14 years old when I abandoned the idea of the whole ministry and church thing. And at that age, my father was in Huntsville, Alabama, and I got a hold of a gun. It was my brother's gun. My brother had been shot. He hit his gun. He told me to go get his gun. I went and got his gun, and I was sick and tired of being around that whole church thing in Huntsville, Alabama. And in those days, I played drums. I had a set of drums. I pawned my drums. I took my brother's gun. I got a bus ticket, Trailways. It stopped me in Philly. I got off the bus in Philly. My family bought me a ticket into New York City. I jumped on the subway. No, I got a taxi from the Port Authority in New York City, put me right at my mother's doorstep. Now I'm with my mother. My mother's husband, he was a nice guy, but he was an uneducated street guy. He worked in one of the local chicken houses, in the hood, fried chicken. And his advice to me, I'm being transparent because I know some brothers can identify with what I'm about to say. His advice to me growing up, I'm 14 years old now. His advice to me was, when you go out and buy some weed, if you're going to smoke it in my house, make sure I get some. And get as many women as you can while you're young. That's his fatherly advice to me. So when I left my mother's household, I went into the hood in the neighborhood, and I had to raise myself in those streets. Now I'm with my peers, who most of them, listen to me, most of them, I'm not exaggerating, came from one parent mother families. I saw my peers, guys I was hanging out with one day, the next week I'm looking at them in a box, dying in their teens, dying in their 20s, no hope. The only mentors around them wasn't a deacon or elder in the church. It was a gangster on the corner. It was a dealer. It was a pimp. It was somebody who was broken themselves. And you got entire generations out there that are still under that kind of plague. And it is killing our young men. Everyone, Lord help me, because this is passionate to me. We all don't have the opportunity to have those positive role models. What do we do as men who God has called to this conversation to speak life into some brothers who are listening to us right now who did not have any of what we said? Elder Preston, I'm kicking it back to you. Then I'm coming to you, Quest Green, because you look like you're about to jump out your seat right now. I know you got something on your mind. Elder Preston, go ahead.
I look at this thing as, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, about training these guys who are brought up in single parent home. And I think that the church do have a responsibility, or should have a responsibility. But first, and I think why I feel that why it has fallen and not has been as successful as it has been, because first we need to establish relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes, and I've pastored churches, and I travel all over this conference. I think some men who want to be mentors to mentor to other young guys are coming up. And even as a pastor, my boys who was some of their best friends was a mother was being brought up in a single parent home, and they wanted to come over, and I didn't have a problem with that, and I wanted to invite them over, but first I talked to my wife, and I go talk to the single mother. I like to invite them over, and sometimes when men try to be a mentor to other guys, sometimes, and that's why you have to have a good relationship with your wife,
Yeah.
because your wife may, if she's jealous or whatever, and she tried to establish, you try to establish this relationship with this young man who is a single mother, the first thing some of them holler out, you try to steal my husband. And that's a drawback, and the truth be told, some females don't even want their husbands, but they live in there with that. So I believe that we need to establish relationship. I think we can set up I think Pastor Nixon was talking about discipleship.
Yeah.
The discipleship program that you can have that can not just maybe just focus on one person, one young man in the church who have a single mother, but you may be dealing with a group where you're coming together and training these guys how these steps, take baby steps, how you can be. It's not, because some of these guys, even with their father in their home,
Mm-hmm.
even with a father in the home, is no guarantee of success, because sometimes these young men will see how their father treating their mother, and getting beat. They see, the only thing they see that my dad always beating on my mom, and they feel that this is the way that we should grow up. We should beat on women, but that is not the right way. We need to take them through some training, this discipleship program, and I think that once we can do this, I think that we can tell them that there is a better way in life, a better way. You can make it, you can be successful, and with that, I'm waiting on to hear from Brother Green myself.
Yeah, he's ready to go in there now. And-
Yes, on that. So I think we need to establish a relationship
Okay.
with these young men plus their mothers. So when we do take them in under the wing, they like Pastor Kelly say that that the guy don't feel taken advantage
Okay.
of someone, young man's mother, because he really has his eye not on the young man, he got his on his mother,
Yeah.
and he figured that this is the way to go through.
Oh,
Yeah, well, and you know, we're gonna jump to Quest Green now. Let me say this: that same stepfather who I told you all about, my brother. Some of y'all know my brother. His name is Brian Anderson. He speaks to mental health, and oftentimes he'll tell our story. I remember we were home one day, and I'll just be frank with you. When I was a teenage boy, I was always packing. You know, I didn't leave the house without my piece. I was packing. That's the world I was in.
I still
I
do.
remember my brother came to me. He's my little brother. He said, Daryl, my stepdad's name was Chubby. They called him Chubb. So already Chubby Chubb. Y'all know we were in the hood. Chubby worked at Zip's Kitchen frying chicken. And he came to me and said, Daryl, Chubby hit Mom. What did Daryl do? I was a teenager. I went to my little drop ceiling in my little row house, sitting in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty. And I got my gun and I walked up to that big 6-something guy. I'm a little skinny 100-something pound dude. And I showed him what I had. And I said, if you hit my mommy again, I'm gonna kill you. And he knew I meant it. That's the real gut-wrenching world. Quest, I know you in some circles. I know you talking to some brothers. I know mentorship is your world. Talk to us right now.
Well, let me say this. First of all, a number of things that you all said is just like, it was just like, for real. I got to be more careful to put my mouthpiece in. What Pastor Nixon was talking about a while ago as it relates to vulnerability is so important, right? That's the first part of all of this. Is that, like, for real, we grew up in some of the places that we grew up, you couldn't be too vulnerable. Why? Because it was almost as if you were an object to get got, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we were taught as we were coming up. And I think this is when you were speaking a while ago to younger men mentoring older men. I think this is what really is the problem, because some of those older men are from the school of hard knocks. Yeah. So in other words, they grew up in times and in environments where you didn't cry. Yeah. Like, for real, you cried for anything, your pops would, you know what I'm saying? He didn't show a certain level of love. It was love, but it was tough love. You roll with the punches, take it on your chin. As a matter of fact, you see it all the time when we go to the funeral, right? All the men got shades on, like we don't know you crying, right? But what I've realized about the fullness of vulnerability, like the dictionary definition, I believe, is susceptible to emotional or physical harm. But there's so much more to the definition of vulnerability. It's being able to show the fullness of yourself to whoever you are and still feel safe in that environment. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. But I think that's the blockage. And Pastor Nixon pointed that out so eloquently. Like, for real, we have to be able to be transparent and vulnerable to some extent when we are mentoring those older gentlemen, if you will, right? The pride gets in the way, and it's the transparency that breaks the wall of pride down. So that's number one. Number two is, like, when we talk about mentoring, what we're doing in essence is really coaching. And what I found out about coaching is that coaching or mentoring is 99% who you are and 1% technique. So in other words, we think that we got to have all this information to impart to people, when really and truly, it's really who you are and how you live your life. Mm-hmm. Like, and here's the funny thing with us in I believe within the church is that we've been led to believe that we got to do this check. I praise God for this morning Sabbath school lesson, because even when we do take the word, we take the word as a checklist, if you will, and not a manual by which how we should live life and have relationships. So a lot of the times we like, yep, check, check, check. And we're worrying about who we're going to become as opposed to who we need to be, if that makes any sense. It's very much goal oriented, right? And what I've realized about this whole thing is that before I can affect anybody's life, there has to be an inside job that takes place. And my transformation is going to be the catalyst and one enormous gift for somebody else for their transformation.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's real stuff. That's real stuff. Daniel Kelly, check this out. True story. I had two friends growing up. I'm a teenager now. One I knew from a very young childhood, and one I met as a teenager. But both of their names were Curtis Mitchell. Watch where I'm going. Both of their names were Kurt. They both had the same name, Curtis Mitchell. Curtis Mitchell, one, was raised by a single mother in a Christian household, and tragically lost his life while away. I think it was during a Thanksgiving holiday. He was a student at Oakwood College. He had just purchased a car. He was on the campus of a school called Pine Forge Academy. And notice how I'm speaking here, because I know that we as Seventh-day Adventists, we can speak in a subculture that the rest of the world don't understand. And if I got brothers out there who are listening, I don't want to lose you in this subculture language. So he was driving his car, lost control, ejected from the car, and he lost his life. His name was Curtis Mitchell. A few months later, in the same year, the second Curtis Mitchell, both of them, I knew them well, they were good friends. The second Curtis Mitchell, who was so opposite the first Curtis Mitchell. The second Curtis Mitchell was a drug dealer. He was a gangster. He came from a family of gangsters. Remember, both of these men are raised by single mothers. He was in a street corner fight on a very street corner where I lived, and he was stabbed to death by another neighborhood friend of ours. He's drowning in his own blood. The police come to him and ask him questions, and he's cursing the police while he's drowning to death in his own blood. Two Curtis Mitchells, both about the same age, died a couple of months apart. One of them was heading back to college. The other one did not have college in mind because he was sold out on the gangster's life. Do you see where I'm going? Polar opposite, two young men, both lost their lives. Both were children of single mothers, but their dynamics were so different. Their truth was so different. Talk to us, Daniel Kelly.
Yeah, that's what we are. That's life, you know. We are a multiplicity and a variety of, and really a culmination of our history. And so when we see, what we would consider as hopeless cases, I think all of us were a hopeless case.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by your testimony. First of all, I didn't know you were a drummer. That's good to learn.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but I might have a beat or two left in me.
Oh, come on, let the rhythm hit him.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
But that look what God did for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's so easily you could have been one of the stories.
I'm gonna tell you something about that too. Go ahead. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And so there has to be that divine aspect that cannot be ignored. That steps are ordered.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes to us seeking just to have that personal relationship with God, just to know, number one, when mentorship is needed. And that has been my prayer. When I started in ministry, I said, Lord, if there's anybody, whether their situation is similar to mine or not,
Yeah.
I've encountered men and young men, some of them almost half my age, who are going through things that I've never experienced. And I grew up in the heart of Brooklyn, the last on the 3 train. I've seen drugs, I've seen gang violence, I've seen all kind of stuff. But it doesn't compare to some of the things. And there are times where I just have to say, bro, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's real, because that's why we're here. The whole premise of "as for me and my house" is for us to be each other's Aaron and her, and to bring tools to help equipment. So we know that we have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do, and it's real. I'm going to take us to a piece now that's extremely important, and I'm going to build it on this premise. I'm a minister of the gospel who has a very, very rough background, who was literally delivered from certain death. And I tell people, if you only knew my story, then you would understand why I'm so amped up on sowing into people, because I do believe that God rescued me from myself, and that if I did not make the decision, because all of this is based on decisions, I would not be alive today. This is what I'm going to say. And the reason I premised it by saying I'm a minister of the gospel is because I believe in the institution that God gave the world to nurture people and to bring people to Jesus Christ and help us stay with Jesus. And that is the church. Well, sometimes, Elder Preston, I'm going back to what you say. Sometimes, we drop the ball. And I'm going to say, I'm going to, again, give you my story. So in the neighborhood, there was a park. It was called Audubon Park. The Audubon Park was the place to be. Y'all know those parks. Gentlemen, give me 1 second. I need to plug up or I will lose you. I'm going to disappear off the screen for 1 second.
Oh, keep talking while you get that plug, Elder.
Somebody keep talking. It's back. Let me tell you something. If I didn't do that, I was going to be in trouble. But I am back, just had to plug in. So here we go. So the park was Audubon Park, in the heart of the hood in Jersey City. But it was on a street called Stegman Street at Kennedy Boulevard, between Kennedy Boulevard and Bergen Avenue.
The bricks.
But the bricks. Right across the street was the Bethel Seventh-day Adventist Church. That was the church I was a child in. My father was an elder and a pathfinder. And we went to the little church school down in the basement with about 10 other kids. It was that world. And then when this little naive lost boy lost his way and began to raise himself in the streets, I would go to Audubon Park. I had my Pitbulls on a big thick chain. Y'all know I lived in that world. When you walk down the street and you had the Pitbulls and parted the street like Moses was parting the Red Sea. I lived that life. And so I'm there in Audubon Park, and I would watch the members of that church go in, because it was literally, you step out of the door of the church, walk across this little narrow street, and you're in Audubon Park. And I would be there sometime in the dark, hanging out with my boys, doing whatever dirt we was doing, looking over there in the distance, watching the members. And at that age, I didn't care anymore for this reason. I want you all to listen to me closely. My aunt, who was a member of the church, called me, my father's sister. She said, Daryl, we had a business meeting and they took your name off the books. And I'm being sarcastic. I said, oh, Auntie, I didn't know my name was still on the books, because I hadn't been to church in a long time. And then I said, well, why did they take my name off the books? She said, because you haven't been here in a while. And so, you were erased. Watch this. That church was in my hood. Many of those members would walk past, because I grew up for the first part of my life in the housing project, Curry's Woods Housing Project, one of the most dangerous projects in the city. Moved a few blocks away to a row house and lived in that row house. And many of the members of the church would walk by me and see me in the streets, because I would look them in the eye. My mother had a child from a second marriage. I'm a teenager. I got a baby brother who's a baby. And I would push him around in the street, in a hot summer day in the hood. And guess what? I was accused of being a derelict daddy, because they thought he was my son. So when they didn't see me with him, where was my son? He wasn't my son, he was my little brother. So the people who dismissed me were the people who saw me, looked down on me, knew where I lived, and never, ever came to knock on my door to say, come home. We have work to do as men in our churches. We can talk a good one if we want, but if we are not walking this walk, and if we are not being our brother's keeper, and I'm gonna go to Aaron and her now, that was all to build the premise of where I'm getting ready to go with these two brothers. And I'm looking at the clock, so I know what kind of time we have. That was to build the premise of where we're going to take this conversation. Elder Willis, I'm going to come to you next. Well, Quest, go ahead and say something. I'm going to go to Elder Willis.
I just wanted to interject this piece, and I think, like for real, my mind just keeps going back to this morning's Sabbath school lesson and the purpose that the word serves in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is for us to be complete in everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
And what I realize is that it gives us information and it gives us knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But it's not knowledge that changes behavior, right? Yeah. It's applied knowledge that changes behavior. Okay. And one of the reasons why we are the way that we are is because we've taken this thing in and we use it as a beating stick, right? Yeah. And we tell people but when it comes to application, I don't know what it is between theory and application, but sometimes there's that disconnect. This is why character is so important. This is why integrity is so important. And it's not about what we do, it's about who we are.
Okay.
Yep. And I think that's the thing that allows us to look at people differently. Like I said, we've become a people of a checklist. Like, okay, attended church today. Yes, tithe and offering today. Yep, I did my extra, whatever work like it's work. And the word declares that it's not works that gets you into heaven. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And so I believe like there needs to be this internal work that needs to be done. When you say there's a lot of work to be done, the first work that we need to do is take a good long look in the mirror and ask ourselves, and I feel like a broken record when I say this, but like for real, who are you, right? Mm-hmm. Where are the areas that I need to improve? There are some stories, you talked about it earlier on, Elder, that some of us come from these backgrounds and we've experienced traumas and a number of different things. And I shared it in Sabbath school this morning, is that those traumatic experiences that we had cause us to tell ourselves these particular stories, right? And these stories that we have, like they form these thoughts. And then the thoughts put these programs in place that allow us, that really control our actions and behaviors as it relates to our results to certain things. So when people walk by who see you, in the predicament, the younger you that they were, immediately they respond because they've gotten to a particular place now. They tell themselves some story that, I don't do that. When, like for real, you act like you never used to, commit certain things in your past life. Yeah. And so you tell yourself this story, it controls your thoughts, and then you put the program in place and now you respond to other people differently, like you never made mistakes. And I'm saying that if we could get a little bit more intentional and deliberate about changing the story, I am a sinner saved by grace. Yeah. If there's any work to be done, then the work needs to be done with me first before I go. You understand what I'm saying?
The narrative, change the narrative. So important.
Because if we don't, we'll keep getting the same results over and over again, operating in insanity when we want something different.
Wow, that's important. Elder Willis, I'm with you now, man. How do we help a broken brother? And I took the time today to be a little transparent for a reason, but I'm off of my story now, but I needed y'all to hear that to take us somewhere. So Elder Willis, how do we help a broken brother?
Well, I'm often reminded of my Pine Forge Academy Dean, my sophomore and junior year, Corey Harris, who would make us recite the scripture for doing worship: as iron sharpens iron, so shall one man sharpen another man. And I think it starts with being okay, being transparent, right? Here's my thing. One, well, obviously you need to read the room. There are some people who don't understand time. So don't just be transparent just because you're trying to be real. But you learn this from a pastoral perspective or from a presenter perspective. If anyone ever been in a presentation where someone has sat back and said, okay, I want you to tell me something about yourself. People are kind of going to look back like, well, what am I supposed to share? Yeah. How am I supposed to share? And no one wants to be the one to go into the deep end. Everyone's like, oh, bring it back. So it's important that one, if you see a brother who's hurt, don't go run right in telling your story. Go reach out to them, talk to them, take them out to eat lunch, go do something, go to the batting cage. Yeah. And in the course of the conversation, start to see where they are, start checking in with them. But you're not going to be able to help them if you're not first vulnerable with them yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to the same point that studies have shown that Black males need to know you before they're going to give you anything.
Mhm.
Or give you their trust to learn. And so I think if we're going to help our brothers who fall into difficult situations, it requires us to take on the challenge. It's not just going to be, oh, let me come and help you. It's not just, oh, let's just have a quick conversation. It is being willing to sit back, have a conversation, and not just listen to them spew, but share, but encourage. I mean, so many guys really, I think they're talking a lot about this. There's just a danger of male loneliness, right? A lot of men don't have just that support group because, as Quest pointed out earlier, we're not taught to be vulnerable because you're being vulnerable. If you're raised on wolves smell blood, so you don't want to give up that blood scent. And so it affects our marriages, affects our relationships, so that we eventually just keep to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we will suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And it's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And
Let
so,
me say this. Let me jump in there and right there, because Elder Preston brought that out last week. How if you ask most men, they can't count their 5 best trusted friends.
Nope.
And so that vulnerability piece is so important. And I will say this, Elder Preston, you may want to weigh in here, because one of the things I've had the blessing of assisting you in men's ministry as a men's ministry coordinator and to help you, just coordinate some things. But as a result, the conversations I'm having with men, Elder Preston, just casual conversations, is why is men's ministry in our different local churches so low on the totem pole of ministries, and why is it so hard to get men to just buy in and go to work? And I'm hearing what Elder Willis is saying, that there is a trust factor here, and it goes back to the relationship piece. Elder Preston, help us out with that piece right there. You're on mute, Elder.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Elder Preston. There you go. You're off.
I don't think you need much help there, Pastor Anderson.
Okay.
The word is trust. Trust. We just don't trust each other.
All right.
And we're not open. We're afraid. We just like a closed window.
Yeah.
And until we open that window and let some fresh air flow in, then we will be able to communicate and better in with that. So my thing is, and the pastor was absolutely correct, it's trust. It's a trust factor.
All right.
With that. And then on the other hand, sometimes I wonder where this church really placed their emphasis at.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about my conference. I'm talking about the Adventist church as a whole. I think that we as a church, we are putting the cart before the horse. If we talk about men and what they responsibility, we want there to be the priests of their home. But when you come down to the dollars, it's not there. Okay. It's not there. And that's overall with this church. I remember, and that's even with families as a total, as a whole. I remember when the first General Conference session was in Indianapolis, Ella Falkenberg was elected president, and I had a meeting with him shortly after, and I asked him where his priority is. I hear you talk about this ministry, that ministry, and that ministry, but I heard you say very little about the family. Mm-hmm. How can we, I believe if we save the family, we save the youth. If we save the family, we can save the man. Wow. If we save the family, we can save other things. But the family, men's ministry, has always has been to me a back burner. It's not a front burner. It's not a deep priority with, I think, within the Adventist church. And so, and what was happening, why should men get so much overwhelmed in men's ministry when the church do not look as a whole where men's ministry is?
Wow.
But I'm happy, in spite of, I see a growing trend in family men's ministry here in our conference, and that's something that we just can't give up on.
We can't.
And I will not give up on. We got to keep plugging this thing, keep hitting it, and I'm sure that one day this cycle is going to be broken, and men must take an interest in themselves. When we call for men's ministry or whatever, just a handful of men may show up with that. But how we expect for the church to invest in us when we first have not invested in ourselves.
That is Elder Preston. Wow, you've said so much there, sir. John Nixon. Just listening to Elder Preston right there. What's a tool we can bring to the local church?
Andrew.
I called you John again.
You're good. He looked like him. He looked like him.
Andrew Nixon, man, forgive me, Andrew. I sincerely apologize. If I call you John one more time, reach through the screen and
He looked like him.
They first cousins, man, but I shouldn't do that. That's just, I don't know what's going on. My apologies to you, Elder Andrew Nixon. Really, what's a tool we can use to bring this beautiful cream called men's ministry up to the surface and make it stronger in our local churches so that we can be a benefit to the men in our churches and then to the men in our community? Andrew Nixon, please talk to us.
I got to be honest, as I was thinking and listening to all this, this is definitely an issue for which I'm not going to pretend like I have all of the answers, but it is definitely an issue that I see as real in both of I have two churches. In both of my churches, last year when they had the women's ministry retreat, we had and I don't have huge churches, but we had vans full of women who were going down to the women's ministry retreat. They're doing all this stuff together. And in both of my churches, I don't even think we really have anything going on at all with the men. And I think I think a lot of gentlemen have said stuff already that really does do that. I think very much culturally, the culture we live in, society we live in, preconditions us in a lot of ways to, as men, to feel like we're the lone wolf. I'm out here by myself. I have to depend on myself, or even if it's just I want to do my best by my family, but still I have to do that on my own. It's not I'm depending on anybody else type thing. Wow. Yeah. Where I feel that women a lot of times they don't have that issue as much as men do. Wow. And I think, like I said, it's very much cultural. Like I said, I had a very good father, but that was definitely one of his weaknesses. He was not someone who was emotionally very expressive and vulnerable emotionally. He was one who was very kind of cut off emotionally. Mm-hmm. And I remember, here's the thing. I remember when my father was sick and dying, literally just a little bit of time before he died, he called me over and hugged me. And that was one of the first times I can remember my father even hugging me. And I mean, wow. I guess that shows you something. That's what it took to get him to hug me. He died not long after that. And I didn't realize, I'm going to tell you this, I didn't realize how much I had wanted that until he did it. Wow. Once he hugged me, then I was like, man, I wish he had done this all throughout my life. So, and I want to be clear, I'm not just, saying my father was a bad man, but
you're not saying that. I don't hear.
He was a product very much of the culture that he was in. If you knew his father, his father made him look like, you know, he was the most emotionally available person in the world. So, you know, we are fruit of a tree, right? And so here's the thing. We have to be willing to change, you know, generation cycles that are going on. So I have a son now, 2 years old, and I go out of my way to hug him. I go out of my way to tell him I love him.
Let me tell you.
I stop and I just pick him up and I say, do you know daddy loves you? And like I said, because that's not what was done to me, it's you know, it's unnatural. But it is something I'm intentional about making sure he knows that, so that by the time he grows, you know, to my age, he'll have no doubt about that. And so he'll be healthier, I believe, in that way than I am. And so I don't think it's, I guess, to summarize all of what I'm saying, I don't think it's something that we can just change in an instant. There are some things that we have to do. We have to take it upon ourselves to make changes, you know, day by day, and generational curses, if you will. We talk about that sometimes.
Let me tell you something, and that is one of those conversations that we will be having in the future in more detail. But you said so much there, so that is going to be the caveat that leads us into the last part of this conversation before we deal with some takeaways from this conversation. I want to go to, not going to read, just going to kind of set it up and transliterate. Exodus 17, 8 through 16. It tells a story about the first battle the Israelites had to fight after coming out of Egyptian captivity. They were not yet a formed army. They were still a very nomadic kind of a people, and the travels they were on had not yet given them the opportunity to train as an army. And so they find themselves in this battle against the Amalekites, and Moses does something. He sits on a rock, and he lifts his hand. He lifts his hand first, I believe. And anyway, as his hands were raised, the scripture says that the Israelites prevailed. When his hands lowered, the Amalekites prevailed. Aaron and Hur, Joshua is out on the battlefield. He's fighting. That's the Joshua generation. The young soldiers are on the battlefield fighting. These three men are up there, the older statesmen. Aaron was Moses' big brother, 3 years older. When they left Egypt, Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83. So he was 3 years older than Moses. And then you had Hur, who was the father of Caleb. So you see how Caleb had something in him when he crossed over and came back with a good report. Hur was his daddy. So there was some optimism that was sown into Caleb through his father. To make a long story short, these men discerned that Moses was weak. He was old and he was tired. So his arms began to come down because his strength began to collapse. That's when they set him on a rock, and they held their brother's arms up in his weakness. As a result of them doing that, Israel prevailed and the family won. So they were 4 men sequenced to bring the family to victory. The Joshua generation on the battlefield, Moses leading, the priest who's leading, and then Aaron and Hur, his assistants, his elders, for lack of better words, all of them worked together. Now, let me say one thing as I premise this, because this is going to guide us out of this conversation. If you read that scripture, there's no place where God told Moses to hold his arms up. You have to go back to the Exodus when they found themselves before the Red Sea to understand Moses' mindset in Exodus 17. Because it was there when they were at the Red Sea. And remember, Moses instructed the people to be still to see the salvation of the Lord. And God came back to Moses and said, I didn't tell you to do that. This is the time to advance forward, not to be still. So Moses gave them the wrong advice. God tells Moses, stretch forth your rod and use the power within you that I have invested in you to part the sea. And when Moses did that, the sea parted. Now he understood God and his relationship with God. And when they were fighting with the Amalekites, he was able to understand God better, and God did not have to ask him to hold his hands up. This time he did it out of experience, out of a relationship. But the brothers knew when their brother was weak, and they stood around him and held his arms up. Elder Preston, what do we see? How can we extract a lesson from that so that we as men can know what it is to hold each other up, to strengthen the men's ministries in our churches, and to be of use to ourselves, our families, each other, and our community? Talk to us, Elder.
I think that what we need to do is really start with relationship. I think we have to get a mindset. We have to come with the mindset that we can make it. I think we have to realize that no man is an island. No man stand alone. We really need each other, because not only we, but we're looking at the future generation that is coming along. This weekend and the weekends to come, this is graduation weekend, and I just wonder where all of these young men will be going. And if we don't have something to pass on to them and their generation, I think I wonder what the future generation is going to look like. I think we need to start where we are. A lot of times I tell guys, don't look for no large group. If the number two y'all meet, and folks started seeing a consistency with these two, somebody else will join, someone else will join. And as we see, we're beginning to building this. We start building this a building block up and up and up and up. But we have to start somewhere.
Yes, sir.
So my thing is, whosoever will, let them come.
Yes.
And continue to build on that. And when they see this relationship and what happening, it don't take a room full of people to get a praise going on. Sometimes you can praise by yourself, but just what happened is 2 or 3 are together in that same room. What basically can happen? But you have to start somewhere. And I say to these men out there, if you need help, how to start men's ministry, how to get it going, Pastor Anderson available, I'm available. You have other guys in this conference or around. I thank for the friendship of our friend Marty in the Georgia Coming Conference, who have kind of mentor with us and working with us and want to build this men's ministry here in this part of the vineyard. And there's so much tools out there. The curriculum that you have, Pastor Anderson, I think it could be very helpful. As I mentioned the other last week, the new men's ministry curriculum called Joshua Men is so much good help out there that can help you get started. And I think that once we do that, I think that we can see great result.
Yes.
Not
Thank you.
But of our conference, and as we continue to move.
And that's powerful. And we will give you an email address. And what we're going to ask you to do, men, those of you who are viewing and listening, if you are taking notes, if you have concerns or questions or topics that you would like to hear discussed on this platform, at the end of this program, I am going to give you a South Atlantic Conference email. Email your questions in. And also, as we build our data bank, what we will be doing, the curriculum Elder Preston referred to, it's called the Aaron and Her Initiative. And it is something that helps build men's ministries in your churches. And we are so willing to share it with you, to help you in that process. Elder Willis, as we are looking at this Aaron and Her.
Just before you go a little further there, Pastor Anderson, and I'm not sure how long we're going to be in this pandemic, what's going to happen in the future. But if we cannot move around, and be able to do the training, I know that Pastor Anderson will be willing to do the same webinar. We can set up a webinar to teach these guys, and you can walk them through how the program really works.
We can do that. I'm excited about the idea of doing that. I was telling Elder Preston, we want the As for Me in My House platform, we want to ride it till the wheels fall off. So this is just a beginning. There are going to be many topics and subjects. We want to delve into every area of life. We want to hear your stories. We want to know how you can help us through your testimonies. Remember, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the words of our testimonies. And sometimes when a brother can identify with you and know that he is not the only one who has been there, sometimes that is a building block of a relationship there within itself. So there we are. I'm going to go to Elder Willis, and then what I'll do is, Elder Preston, it is 6:21. We'll give you 5 minutes or so to wrap up. Then we're going to go around the table and get every man's takeaway. Brothers, if you can offer a tool to a man today based on this conversation, we're going to ask you that in your final takeaway. I'm coming around to everyone. Elder Willis, Aaron, and her, we're holding each other up. What is another tool that you see us being able to bring to our families, our households, as it pertains to a strength, an added strength for us to just be that man we can be based on being nurtured and helped and understanding our own vulnerabilities?
Well, I think you gave a great synopsis of how it's intergenerational, right? How the young man did the fighting and the older men did the praying, but also just holding the hands up. And so I think one thing is recognizing that we're necessary. And what I mean by that is, in this society, if we just take a moment to reflect upon Ahmad, who passed away in Georgia, our lives here are really expendable.
Yeah.
And in the eyes of the populace, right, our lives are expendable. And we need to pour more into men. I sit back and I'm at the church, Northeast Seventh-day Adventist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, a great intergenerational church. And I sit back and I look at my young men, and I look at them, I say, man, these are some brilliant, these are some great, these are some bright guys. But as I see that, I also see how much direction they need, right? And I think most of us, because we grew up in these environments, as Quest pointed out, where you're not vulnerable, we do more critiquing than building up. And so I think it's important that we take the time to affirm these young men as they're coming up. Just praise them for what they're doing, praise them for the gifts you see in them, but also challenge them. Don't just get so caught up in praising them that you're not challenging them to step up to what is a man of God. And so I think, even if it's just and this goes back to Andrew's point, discipleship should fall into all layers of our church. And this men's ministry really is about discipleship. And so if you have a basketball program at your church, right, don't just say that's a young man's thing. The older men need to come out there and be talking to the young men. When there's practice, be coaching them up, giving them advice, giving them wisdom. But don't let the advice enter the basketball court. It has to transcend from the basketball court to life. Because the reason we do sports isn't about winning a game. Who cares about winning a game? There are a lot of life lessons that can be translated from that. Some of the greatest influence in my life outside my father and some of my teachers have been my coaches, where I just sit back and they've poured into me about basketball, about whatever I'm doing, but also to give me that direction, that instruction as I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a man. And so I think we have to plug men's ministry into the plethora of ministries we already do. Make it a mission as opposed to a ministry. That is to say, it needs to be ingrained in everything as opposed to just this one isolated event. Because if you put on a men's ministry conference, you may not get that turnout. But if you put on a basketball tournament or a basketball league or a Super Bowl party or just have some various things going on, I guarantee if you're intentional about having a men's ministry mission and a discipleship mission, it becomes easier to build them up and work with them so that over time that relationship just molds and you feel a familial experience between you and your brother. The church I grew up in, I'm gonna close with this. Church I grew up in.
We only have 5 minutes.
I have to give Elder Preston this time.
No,
So,
look, give them a 30 second for a takeaway, Elder. Each
okay,
member
we'll
of the panel.
go ahead to the takeaway. So Elder Wilson, I'm going to have to take us to the takeaways. Take 30 seconds. I'm going to start with Quest Green. Now, this is where you're going to give somebody a tool right now. Quest Green, what's your takeaway?
My takeaway is, for real, work on our integrity and our character. You can't take someone to some place that you've never been.
Okay.
A lot of the times in church, like, for real, we have these conversations and we wax deep, like, for real. But if what you do as an individual doesn't line up with what you wax deep with, if there's no connection in between the two, then what we'll do is keep getting the same results that we've always been getting. The question at the end of the day is Christ living out his perfect will in you? Because here's the thing, a lot of the times, we don't even have to say anything to anybody. If you living right, and people notice it, they'll come and ask you questions. I won't ask you for something I don't think you can deliver. I'll ask you for what I think you can deliver.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Evan Willis, what is your takeaway? 30 seconds.
I'll say it in one sentence. Start with trust and build from there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Daniel Kelly, what is your takeaway?
I would say my takeaway is by way of encouragement. I think that we are doing so much better than previous generations. I do commend the growth that I personally have seen. I remember one of my best friends, his dad didn't even allow him. Wait a minute, Andrew Nixon, you got a cat? Good grief, man, that's weird. All right, he didn't even allow him to call him dad. They have to call him by his name. When I see him with his children, I see this loving, nurturing, same thing with Nixon.
Yeah.
He was a huggy. And so I want to commend the brothers for the growth. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep growing.
Powerful. Andrew Nixon, what is your takeaway?
I want to suggest that we evaluate our time. I think there's so many things that take our attention nowadays. If we really want to be the leaders in our homes and make changes in our families, we need to be able to not just talk about doing something, but actually be able to give the time and the effort to those things. But, when I stop and I evaluate my time these days, I realize there's a lot of things that distract my time, not even just, church stuff, but even when I have free time, it's easy to just lose so much time just watching a game or watching a TV show or going off and doing your hobby or whatever it may be. And if you do not evaluate your time and find where you have the opportunity to take time to invest in these things that you believe are important, then you'll never be able to really make any change. So if that's my takeaway or my tool that I would give to people, evaluate time and make the time to really actually be able to give to what you believe is most important.
Powerful conversation, gentlemen. Before we turn it over to Elder Preston, let me give you an email. Everyone who's out there, if you want to send in some questions or ideas for topics for us to discuss, here it is, sacinfo@sacsda.org. SAC, South Atlantic Conference. Info, INFO, at sacsda.org. Send in your questions, your comments, and we will respectfully consider them. And maybe one of yours might be the next conversation coming up. We're going to turn it over to Elder Preston to close us out. And Elder, we're going to ask you to close us out and then say a word of prayer. We're down to 1 minute, really. Go ahead, Elder, it's yours.
Once again, I'd like to thank Pastor Anderson and our panel today for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this webinar. We're hoping that this has been very helpful to you. And we'll continue to pray, and we'll also continue to pray for you. And as we continue to be that Aaron and her, uplifting each other in our most difficult time. We invite you back on next week as we come to the conclusion of our part 3 and this particular series. Our conference president, Ella Winston, will be with us to give us our final charge on next week. I like to lead Hebrew chapter 4 and verses 15 and 16, and really it's the last part of verse 16. Let us approach the God throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And I believe that if we continue to seek him and approach his throne, I believe that he can help us and he will help us in our most difficult time. May God continue to bless you. And once again, happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers. And we thank you, men, for joining with us again today. Let us pray. Father our God, we present our men to thee this day. We ask that you will continue to lead us, guide us. Let us be the Aaron and Ur, upholding one another. And because we know that the source of all our strength come from you. Now continue to bless us and keep us until next week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Godspeed to all who believe. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you,
God
gentlemen.
bless you.
God bless you.